Welcome back, everyone. In this video, I want to dive a little deeper into this observer pattern that we're now seeing from this on-auth state changed. So let's talk about it in the sense of thinking in streams. When you think about a stream, you can think about a sequence of asynchronous events, such as a click. When a user clicks onto a button or on the website, if you are listening for that click, you actually don't know when that user makes any of those clicks, because a user might click, they might wait 5 seconds and then click again. They might wait 1 second. They might make 1 hour. The concept of an asynchronous stream is just one where it's a sequence of most likely the same kind of event, but just with an indefinite amount of time between them. So here you can visualize it as if there is a start of a stream. So let's talk about this click stream. And then the user clicks. 3 seconds pass by, they click again. 10 minutes pass by, they click. And then suddenly, let's say they click 3 times in a row really quickly. Still subsequent clicks though, but just with very short intervals of time between it. And then maybe they click one more time after 30 seconds, and so on and so forth and so on and so forth. The idea with this stream is really just that it's a sequence of events, meaning that there is an order to them in time. As I mentioned before, the key thing here being that there is a variable amount of time between these events, and that is really the main thing about streams. The part of why this is interesting as a pattern is because we are able to react to each of these events inside of this stream. So you want to see this stream as a observable. There are libraries such as Redux.js that essentially encapsulate this concept. But the main thing for you to focus on is that this is just some kind of asynchronous stream of events. The part where you interact with it is where you use a listener. And a listener is really just a class or some kind of object that has 3 key methods on it. The first is the next method. Next is called every time a new event in the stream happens. And what will happen is that that event will get passed to this next function. And then for us, we're really just saying, hey, here's a callback that is expecting to receive that event. And then what we do with it is up to our code. Next is really just pointing to our callback, which is really what that callback was when we passed to on-auth state changed. This is exactly the next callback. There is also a error callback. And this error callback just says, oh, do something whenever we throw an error. And then finally, there is a complete callback. So for streams might actually close, meaning that at some point we might say, hey, I know I'm done sending out events from this stream. So let me just tell everybody that there's no more events coming. If the stream is open, we can anticipate more stuff to come. If it's closed, it's most likely complete. So how this works is that we need to, in some way, subscribe from our listener to the stream. And this subscription is really just saying, hey, let me start listening to what happens in the stream. And you can listen at any point when the stream is going. Because remember, this stream is happening in time. So it's possible that maybe we are listening at the start of the stream, meaning no events have triggered yet. So in this case, what's going to happen? The first event fires, it goes to our next function. So our next function gets called. Similarly, the next one fires, we call the next function again. The next event fires, we call the next function again, and so on and so forth for the remainder of the upcoming events. The one thing to note here is that the moment that this stream, let's say it's done though, it will complete, which we will learn. So our listener will find that out from the stream, because the stream will actually say, hey, I'm done. And the moment it says it's done, it's going to fire the complete method of every listener that's listening to this stream. So here, complete runs, and maybe based on whatever callback we have there, it will do something to clean up or whatever it needs to do in order to know that, oh, I'm done using this stream. But as I mentioned before, we might actually subscribe when a couple events have already happened. Let's imagine that in our stream, 2 events have already happened maybe 30 seconds ago. By the time we subscribe, we will not get those two events because they're in the past. It's already over. What we can do now is just start listening for the new events. So when the third event happens in the stream, then we'll catch it because we've subscribed already. And similarly, we'll call next. And then any future event that happens, we will also call next on and be aware of them. So this is one important thing to know about subscription models. The other thing is that similarly as before, when it completes, the complete callback gets called. So as far as this model is concerned, it's really just understanding the nuances of the timing of these streams. But generally speaking, the actual logic is very simple. You get some event, you fire next. Once it's done, once the stream is complete, you fire complete. Oftentimes we don't fire it either. This is just a pattern that emerges. So essentially, as long as you're subscribing with some object that has these three methods, next, error, and complete, and they all three point to different callbacks, the actual observer stream will be the one that actually will call these methods to whatever is subscribed to them. So imagine that we had a complete stream, for example. In this particular case, you might subscribe to an already completed stream. If that happens, you will not get any of these events because once again, all of these events have already done and the stream itself has already completed. So now, let's talk about this error method. How does this happen? In a stream of events, let's imagine one event has fired so far. We subscribe, and now we start listening for subsequent events after the first one. Remember, as I mentioned, that first event's fired, we have no knowledge of it. When we subscribe, let's say a new event happens, event 2. Again, we call next, and then we call next again. But then suddenly, let's say something breaks in the stream. For some reason, we get some kind of error. You can imagine with API calls, asynchronous events, there are chances that maybe there's a network delay, maybe there's a server error, something happens in this process. When that happens, we get informed by the stream that there is an error. Then our listener is in turn going to call the error method. So this is very similar to, you can think about it as if you have a promise. With a promise, when you get an error, it'll reject. This error callback that we have is pretty much the same thing. So this is what's really good about this stream model, because essentially now you're able to react consistently in this way from these streams. The last thing I want to mention is that a stream can have any number of listeners. Any number of different listeners can have different reactions to what happens in the stream, but each of them just need to subscribe to the stream. So whenever we were working with our on-auth state changed, all we were saying is that, hey, I want to start listening to on-auth state change the moment we invoked the function and we passed it the callback. Similarly, with that on-auth state change, we can also pass it an error callback and a complete callback as arguments 3 and 4. We're just really using the first two arguments, if you remember, inside of our code base. If you want to think about us opening up the listener with this method, the moment we call this method, we're saying, hey, create a listener for me using this callback. So what's happening here is that this on-auth state changed invocation is actually behind the scenes creating a listener for us. You can imagine it like that. And on here, it's going to take the next value and set it as our callback. We can actually call it with more parameters, as I was mentioning. Here you can see that in that list, we were looking at the auth, the next or observer, and this is the callback trigger on change, as I mentioned. There is an error param we can pass as number 3 and a completed callback as number 4. So here you can imagine that we could have passed an error callback if we wanted to, and then a completed callback. So this is pretty much just that same model. It's just that behind the scenes, this on-auth state change is just building out this actual listener model for us. So this is really all there is to know about this observer pattern. It's honestly rather simple once you wrap your mind around this concept of an asynchronous stream. But once you really just understand how it works, as far as you're concerned, all you know is that you need to give it a callback. And as I mentioned before, we need to also clean up this listener. So that's why it returns us back a unsubscribe. So essentially what happens is that on this unsubscribe method, it will clean up this actual method. And oftentimes with this unsubscribe, also it will call, if you were to pass it a complete callback, it will also call that, which is why when you hover over it, you see that the param completed, callback trigger when observer is removed. And that often also happens in the cleanup phase. Now that we've finished up with everything we need when it comes to isolating our authentication, what I want you to do before moving on is just commit your code, push it up, and then join me in the next video. I'll see you there.